Aloha. Good afternoon. It's May 26, 2021. Welcome to What Now America? The title of this show is Hatred in America. It's on the rise. And before I go to my guests and before I dive into this topic, I want to just do a little historical background. And that is back in 1968, President Johnson, he signed into law the first Anti-Hate Crime Act. And that act was to prevent basically crimes against race, color, religion, and national origin. Then we fast forward to 1998, where into law was signed a Church Arson Prevention Act, and the act speaks for itself. Burning of churches and religious symbols is considered a federal hate crime. Then we fast forward to 2009, October 22nd, President Obama signed into law the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Preventative Act. And what happened to Matthew Shepard? He was beaten and killed and left to die on a barbed wire fence in Laramie, Wyoming. And James Byrd Jr. was dragged to death in Texas, and for the sole reason of their crime was being gay. So this law enhanced the 1968 law, which now made it a federal crime, or part of the Federal Crime Act, for sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability. So let's fast forward from there. And in 2018, in Pittsburgh, at the Tree of Life Synagogue, 11 people were executed on the sole purpose and the sole reason of their religion. And then August 3rd, 2019, a shooter went into El Paso Walmart and he targeted and killed 22 people, and his target was Mexicans or descent of Mexicans. So we have hate crimes taking place all the time. And then just recently, we have Robert Aaron Long, who went into Georgia, into the massage parlors and killed 8 people, and 6 were women of Asian descent. So here we are. This is the background. Yet in the last 2-3 weeks, and longer than that for Asians, we're seeing on the street violence taking place left and right. And it wasn't until just recently where President Joe Biden had to sign into law the COVID Anti-Asian Prevention Hatred Act. So Jay, let me go to you. Well, before I do, Jay, let me introduce you. Today we have Jay Fidell, Stephanie Dalton, and Cynthia Lee Sinclair. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Tim.
Jay, I just gave a background on some of the anti-hate crime, federal crime bills that have been enacted. We've seen mass shootings take place that involved either victims who are of a particular religion or race or gender or sexual orientation. This is getting worse. Why is it getting worse? What is the catalyst for the crimes against Asians on the street, the crimes against Jewish people in their synagogues, the crimes against the LGBTQ population? What's going on?
Well, to reach back into history again, I think the country is, of course, it's polyglot. It's a layer after layer of immigrant. It's layer after layer of people who are disadvantaged or advantaged, or who want to be advantaged and have a benefit over the disadvantaged or other groups. And so we have a long history of hate crimes. We have a long history of hate. That's the nature, I suppose, of a melting pot. You take that as part of the baggage of a melting pot for, right into the 19th century. But, your point, I take your point. It's getting worse. It's getting worse, and Congress is doing less. There's no chance of, the George Floyd bill is going to fail. The Republicans will never agree to it. All these mass shootings, Congress is never going to do anything, not in this time in our history, because the Republicans won't go along with it. It's really sad that A, we have an increase, and B, we're not doing anything about it. We're doing less than we were doing before. And I submit to you, Tim, that the increase was enabled by Trump. that he took certain steps to encourage and give voice to people who would be inclined to do hate crimes. He gave them a license and they took it. As a result, the regular ebb and flow of hate crimes has increased in and after his administration. There are three things that have to do with extremist ideologies and, for that matter, terrorism and hate crimes, violence expressed in this kind of political way. Number one is the need. That is, people have to be needy. They have to need to be recognized they're not happy in their lives. And indeed, if you look at the people who conduct these crimes, they're all sad sack cases. They are needy. And the second N, the three N's, the second N is a narrative. They have to believe that their problem will be resolved, that we'll all be better off if they do this hate crime. We got to get rid of this group or, reduce the influence of this group or whatever it is. And that's how they solve their need problem. The third N is the most interesting. The third N is the networking. And that's what's happened in the Trump administration. These hate groups have come together. He has created the network for them. And January 6th was certainly a network. But they were rubbing shoulders as never before. And that is still happening. And I think we have a serious condition now that got worse because of Trump and because of all the things he did. So we have a lot of people who are unhappy. We have a lot of false narratives. We have a lot of people who are unhappy. We have a lot of false narratives that they believe, QAnon and the like. And finally, we have the network. We're in a perfect petri dish for the development of greater and greater hate crimes in all directions right now.
Jay, when President Biden signed it was on May 20th, and he signed the bill that it was a COVID-related bill. It was the Anti-Asian hate crime bill. He said the following: "Of all good that the law can do, we have to change our hearts." And that goes to your point that these people are disgruntled. They have a sour heart. They have a deeply flawed heart at this point. But a lot of these hate crimes are not white supremacist groups getting together and banding on the streets of New York or other cities. It's individuals that may not even be connected to the Proud Boys or white supremacist groups. They're individuals that live next door to us, or that we see them in our shopping malls. We see them, we see them on the road. They're individuals that we would never know that they carry this kind of disease in their heart, yet there it is. And these are the ones that we've seen video footage of them kicking elderly Asian women on the sidewalk, and no one stands up for them. No one came to their aid. How do we address that, Jay? How do we address it's not the group that's doing these crimes, it's the individual? And how do we prevent it? Do we need good Samaritan laws for people to step in and help the victims out before they become horribly injured and rocked in the hospital? How do we begin to address this as a citizen of our society?
First, thanks for pointing out the anti-Asian hate bill that was passed by the Congress. It still doesn't explain why they haven't passed the George Floyd bill and why they haven't taken steps for any other groups and any other bills that have been presented by the House to the Senate. That's very sad. So we do need legislation, not only because of the substantive content of the legislation, but because it's a statement. It's a statement by government, by the country. This is not good. We don't buy into this. There will be, problems for you if you do hate crime. That's one thing. So you need to have, and when Biden makes a statement, that you gotta stop doing this. This is good. He's got to condemn this sort of thing, and we should have that on a regular basis. That's one thing. But the other thing is to recognize, these situations, and I'll roll back through my triple N's. The network. I mean, a lot. I shouldn't say all, but a lot of these guys have been enabled on the web, right? If you go do the investigation after, you find that they were watching videos They were involved in Facebook groups and the like that encouraged them, that gave them license to go and do this stuff. We got to take that network away. And if that means coming down hard on Facebook, so be it. We can't let any network enable them. Okay, rolling back to the thing about the narrative, can't tolerate false facts. You can't tolerate QAnon. And Trump did that. And now we have it. It's like a virus. Sorry, it's a good parallel though. People believe in false narratives, and that enables them to exercise their needs, and into violence. So we have to clean that up in the country in general. It's dangerous to have false narratives. And finally, the need. We have to recognize that some people are really unhappy. What are they unhappy about? They hate the government. They blow up the federal buildings in Oklahoma City. We have to bring people closer to the government, make them understand that we are the government is us. We have to make them understand that, this kind of animus about the layering of our society over the history of the United States, the hate, the bigotry, there's no time for that. We have to give them a better life so they don't think that way. This is a major problem. This is a reordering. If you wanted to get rid of this, you have to reorder the society. You have to go back to school. And this goes to Germany. Germany wanted to generate. Hitler wanted to generate hate, and he decided that he was going to organize Hitler Youth. He was going to reach into the classroom at very early age, something the way, in my view, that BDS does about Israel and the Jews. You reach into the classroom as young as you can get them, and you teach them hate. And nobody is opposing that. Nobody is stopping that. It's happening. It's still happening here. And we really need to look at our educational system and start teaching people about love, or at least not hate.
Good point, Jay. And I want to go to that last point of yours. Cynthia, Jay said no one's standing up to this. Is the GOP party complicit with the occurrences of all these hate crimes? Are they being silent because they don't want to offend Donald Trump and his way of hatred towards, for those of the Islam faith, for those that look different than who he hangs out at Mar-a-Lago?
Well,
do we have complicity with the GOP on this?
Absolutely. And their silence isn't maybe just because of Trump. Their silence could be because they agree with him. They agree with this. In looking at some stuff for this week, I was looking at how far back, what about all these religious wars that they, okay, so in World War II, turns out Dwight Eisenhower really linked war and religion, right? And so they seem to be inextricably joined at the hip still. So now still religion is okay, violence is okay. So all these churches, and there's a lot of them, that are preaching this stuff, right? This hatred. It's not just coming from the white supremacists and the Boogaloo boys. It's coming in our churches.
Are you talking about evangelical churches or
more
Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church? What churches are we referring to?
Mostly the non-denominational evangelical sort of new age Christian churches. Okay. Those are the ones that are more prone to it. But the Catholic Church preached hate for years. The Mormon Church would not allow Black people to join their church.
Correct.
So this hate has been taught through Sunday school to our kids. So I think teaching them, young makes a difference. So we're in the South. When I was a minister out there were so many people that I talked to that told me things that they learned in Sunday school. Well, I can't play with that Black boy. He can't even come to my church, kind of stuff, right? So right now I have found a really amazing article in the New Yorker that's by Eliza Griswold. And it's sort of about this whole thing, right? The she really starts by talking about Doug Mastriano, who is a Republican senator in Pennsylvania. Okay, he fought in the war. He feels the same way, right? Same thing. Comes home and thinks that violence in religion is okay. And so that connection needs to be split apart because it doesn't just apply to war. He came back from war and still has that idea in his head and preaches it, so to speak. He's not a preacher, but and spews it, I should say, at rallies constantly. He was one of the head guys that did the Stop the Steal thing, right? He was a supporter of that. And so we see pastors that tell their parishioners, don't go to that church anymore if they won't let you come and worship in person. Don't even go there. That means they're not a good church. Well, the entire Methodist Church, right off the bat, stopped meeting in person before we were told we had to, because we didn't want to get anybody sick. So we sort of already started doing that to begin with. That to me is what a healthy church looks like, as opposed to the other churches that are saying, don't go to that church anymore.
All righty.
This guy keeps standing up against masks. He's very much, so I think that we have to look to our churches, right? I think we do.
As part of the solution or part of the problem or both?
Both.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate that. Hey, Stephanie, it took 5 long days for members of the GOP to stand up and say, oh, well, I guess we shouldn't listen to Marjorie Stone Taylor as much as we love to, because she's the one that made a comparison of wearing masks to the Star of David attached to the sleeves and chests of those in Nazi Germany that were in concentration camps. She made a direct comparison, and then she doubled down to say, I didn't say anything wrong. I meant what I said. What do you say to the fact that she's a member of Congress, and it took 5 days for Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy to utter a peep about the inappropriateness of her statements? Where does that put us today? And is that a green light for hatred for those that get the nod and wink, the dog whistle, if you will, about it's okay to think like this?
Yeah, it's very disturbing, and those are the kinds of things that are showering down on our lives, and so that there's nothing to stop her doing that, because the Congress is not going to do anything unless they do. I have heard some things that they may censor her or do something minimum, but so far, I mean, what we're seeing is this entire rampage through the whole system of our institutions that has been taken on by the former president. He has hollowed everything out. He has criticized, ridiculed, and omit and just denied all of the values and of those institutions, and then and therefore the norms are collapsing, and nobody is standing up to them. And I think that it was mentioned that it is this case that is one of the indices of how far, and if it's a total destruction, because this case of that the grand jury is looking at with the New York people and the federal people, if he can manage to decry and minimize and ridicule this grand jury and those efforts in that case, then that will seal the value of the institution of law. The law is going to have been hollowed out, and that's the last one to stand, because everything else is down.
Okay, let me interrupt you then. What's it say about Twitter that allows 17,000 tweets in 1 week? They allow 17,000 tweets with the following message: Hitler was right. Now, Jay alluded to the increase of violence thanks to social media, but this just recently occurred. Is it time for federal regulations to say, First Amendment be damned? This is a direct correlation to the spawn of hatred and these acts that we are seeing taking place in New York, LA, and across the country, be it against Asians, Jewish, or
Yeah.
LGBTQ populations. Where does this stop?
It was
And where does the role of the federal government to intercede?
it was the recommendation that Marjorie, the whatever names, we should visit the Holocaust Museum, because one of the factors here is definitely ignorance, because these people are young, they weren't exposed to any of this in the way that previous generations were. The Eisenhower group, actually walking in, seeing it, then all the rest of, the next couple of generations being utterly horrified by it, and the institutions, railing against it and strengthening their own norms against that kind of behavior.
Okay, let me go to that point. Is it ignorance, or is it political, an advantage politically for them to excel and increase popularity and votes, and it works for them?
Well, that's what's working now, because that's part of this conspiracy thing. If you don't have anything else but ignorance, then all you do is this conspiracy thing. And what makes you attractive in continuing to promote these conspiracies is ridiculing all of the other information, just like the leader is doing. So just like Donald Trump is belittling and minimizing and all of these values and norms that have been established for generations or forever, and that's what's coming down. And that's one of the reasons I'm so concerned now about this case that's in the grand jury right now. Let's see what happens, because if that goes and nothing comes out of that, like nothing has ever come through for him to have consequences or accountability, that is going to be very dark days. But we have this president and administration in place who seem to be playing the right notes. They seem to be not creating more disturbance, but trying to get people to see that there's good, what the government can do, and they're getting their checks and also their other benefits. So we do have some things going, but it's not the hammer that the president and all that he's accrued through his work over the last 5-6 years to get people that have now got power, because he's given them power. The 33% that have this power now and are scaring to death all the Republicans, whether they believe any of this stuff or not, they know that this 33% base of Trumps can actually derail almost all of them. And they're terrified of doing that. I'd prefer that instead of being terrified, they just walk away and let's go do something else before the whole election thing goes completely away. Because see, that's another one of the institutions that are hollowed out, is all of the voting. So we're really on the edge. We're really on the edge of the cliff here, hanging, on getting ready to get pushed off. And then what is it? Then what is it, Tim?
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hey, Jay, is the media doing enough to report on hate crimes, violence that we're seeing in the news, obviously, because that's why it's on today's show. But are they doing enough to identify not only what it is, but what's behind it? Where are the factors that are motivating these people to increase violence against their fellow countrymen? Are they doing enough to get to the why versus the what?
Oh, yeah, well, they're not doing enough. They should be examining it. They should do a complete examination of every hate crime. They should tell who it is, if they possibly can, without risk of, the lawsuit or disparagement. And they should cover the prosecution, or more important, they should cover the non-prosecution. They should cover the prosecuting authorities, the police authorities who don't do anything about it. They should cover the legislative bodies that don't do anything about it. This is really horrendous that we have this problem. I'm not saying it's the only problem. We could sit here, and we do sit here, and we examine all the problems, and they all sound the same in their funny way. The government has failed us. But one of the things that came up in this discussion, this is worth mentioning, is your question, Tim, about whether the government should do something about the 17,000, Hitler was right remarks on Twitter. This is very concerning because, as I mentioned, networking enables hate. In fact, it gives license to hate crimes. This is real serious. We can't tolerate this. So Joe Biden can get up there and say, bad idea, you shouldn't do that, nasty, nasty. But, do we need more? And should government be involved? This is arguably a news organization protected by the First Amendment. And the very fact that you asked the question, the very fact that we think about the answer, puts the First Amendment in jeopardy. I mean, if you have enough hate, enough violence, enough terrorism in a given society, you have to consider whether your First Amendment rights should be curtailed to avoid the hate, to avoid the violence. And maybe they should. In another country, maybe a more authoritarian country, the government could and does step in and control the message from social media. So it's a balance. It's a balance for, the constitutional norms that we have worked on refining all these years. It's not just the Constitution. As Stephanie says, it's the norms. It's what we have learned about living together in some semblance of harmony. And I think that we have to consider this as a dangerous matter. It's dangerous because they create Twitter and the like. They create hate and hate crimes. And it's dangerous on the side of the government because, the power to control and curtail Twitter, is undermines our First Amendment.
Do we see
rights.
the elimination? And pardon me, I forgot the name of the bill, or the current law where it prevents social media platforms from civic liability suits. Do we see the elimination of that in the Biden administration?
I haven't heard much about it. I did hear, when it was first proposed.
Well, Donald Trump wanted to remember. Donald Trump wanted to get rid of it.
But folks,
the social media should be responsible for the statements they publish. The only way to get them to be responsible is by a bill like that. But I think it has very little chance of passing. I think that, you don't realize how powerful the social media companies are in terms of money and influence in Washington. So I have to agree with you, though, that kind of bill could actually have an effect without the government stepping in. In effect, it would put the power to stop social media from making or publishing irresponsible comments in the hands of the public. And that would have a salutary effect. I'm not saying that solves the problem. I'm saying I think it would have a positive effect.
but
Well, it's never a silver magic bullet that wins the day. It's usually a silver buckshot approach.
Right.
how would it do that? What is this benefit how would it work, Jay? You said
It would mean that right now, social media says, oh, I didn't say it. The other guy said it. I just gave him a platform. It's not my statement, it's his statement. And I'm just giving him a platform. But if you said, well, but you can allow or disallow inappropriate statements, hate statements, defamatory statements, and the like. And we're gonna allow the citizens to go after you. You're not exempt. You're not exculpated. You are liable, just as if you came up with that statement. Then it would put the policing authority in the hands of the public. And if you were offended, you could go after them. This would keep them honest, would it not?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is that this is a democracy and we must abide by the principles of democracy. We must learn how better to work within the democracy and those principles. And that's why I value what the administration is doing. Maybe they got to do it harder, longer, more frequently, but and call in other resources to help with that, get rid of the filibuster so we can get some legislation through. We've got to use the democracy, because if we start shutting down on First Amendment rights or others, that's going against our democracy.
And that's not a First Amendment right thing. The idea about letting the public go after the social media companies is not
litigation.
First Amendment.
It's good old-fashioned litigation. Hey, we've run out of time. I want to go around the Zoom table, if you will. Cynthia, your last thoughts and comments for this week?
I think America did not start out as this great democracy that was so full of love, and we've just grown up in love. I think we started out as a very much of a hatred type filled country trying to take over this country from the Indians, full of hate for the Indians that was supported by the government. Okay, so some of us have grown beyond that. Some of us have not. Some of us are still stuck in that same ignorant, if you will, ideal that in order for America to be great, it has to be white, right? It has to be Christian. You have to get rid of all this other stuff. I have a quote, and then I'll be done, I know. Okay, you know me and my quotes, right? So John Winthrop, who was the 17th century Puritan leader, he preached that colonial America would become the city on the hill that Jesus described in his Sermon on the Mount. In order to advance his Christian civilization, violence was required. This isn't about war against somebody else. This is to establish the Christian civilization. Violence is required. That is, I think, the key thing that has permeated some people's minds and generations of people, and they've never learned anything different, right? So the last thing he says is something that he regularly talked about, right? Was that killing Indians in a providential way, and 200 years later, this language is what leads directly into manifest destiny.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, Cynthia, poignant points and poignant words. Thank you so much. Hey, Stephanie, your last comments, please.
I think there's some, what Cynthia says is insightful. I think that that we have been doing this since, including the First Crusade. We evidently the Christians taught the Arabs how to make a river turn into full of blood. That the violence was so horrific. The Arabs were shocked, but then they learned how to do it too and came back in the second and whacked us Christians there. But I mean, so we've got to go. We've got to do better than this. There's only one person that's helped with this. The only person that's broken through this, and what Cynthia's pointing out, frankly, in my opinion, is Martin Luther King Jr. So we need the kind of people that are Christian and open to being inclusive and doing the things that our democracy stands for.
Right.
Great words. Jay, you get the last word.
Okay, go see the serial called The Underground Railroad. And it's about slavery, and it's really interesting. It'll teach you things you didn't know. And what is remarkable, and what I take from that, is that perhaps we didn't realize just how bad it was at the time of the founding. Everybody, looks back to the founding as a religious experience. No, the founding perpetuated slavery for 80, 90 years after that. Slavery was a fatal flaw, if you will, and we're still living in a time affected by what they did over slavery. And it has spread to other bigotry, other groups. So the layering of the melting pot is not over slavery, slavery exacerbated it. The other thing I just want to mention is I totally agree, with Stephanie in her remark that we are on the edge. We are on the edge. Tim, when we started this program some time ago, we thought that when Trump was out of office, somehow there'd be this great denouement, and we would be safe and happy and back to some level of normalcy. Not happened. It's gotten worse. It is getting worse. And I agree that we should be very concerned. We're on the edge.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Jay, for your words. I'd like to thank you, Jay Fidell, Stephanie Dalton, Cynthia Lee Sinclair. Thank you for appearing on What Now America. I'm Tim Apicella, your host. Please join us next week, Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Until then, aloha.